Вітаю, і цей брифінг присвячений викриттю чергової партії.
Good afternoon. This briefing is devoted to exposing another batch of propaganda from the aggressor state. In recent days, Russia has been focused on two topics that have been filling the information space. The first one is discrediting the revolution of dignity and trying to present both to its own citizens and to the citizens of countries outside of Russia, to the citizens of other countries, that the aggression that Russia started is a derivative of the Ukrainian revolution of dignity. One of Russia's highest officials, the chairman of the State Duma, Volodin, directly accuses Ukraine of having provoked Russia into this war. Today is the anniversary of the Maidan uprising during the rule of the criminal Kiev regime. 11 million people have made a choice to be with Russia, says Volodin, referring to the fake referendums that accompanied each new annexation of Ukrainian territory. Referendums that are not recognized by anyone in the world and are only intended to legitimize what the Russian army has committed as an aggressor. Likewise, Russian propaganda is trying to put this aggression on the same level with the West's alleged attempt to annex Ukraine, which of course has no place in real history. Hundreds of thousands of people are being sent to the slaughter by the Kiev regime at the request of the United States. Complete nonsense. Washington and London recommended that Kiev lower the conscription age to 17 years old and raise it to 70 years old. Conduct additional mobilization of women, also a lie. Insisting on waging war in the interest to the last Ukrainian. It is Russia that is the aggressor. It is Russia that came to kill Ukrainians on their territory. Neither Washington nor London is a party to this conflict. But the bridge in the propaganda between the events of the Maidan in 2014 and Russia's current aggression is also being drawn by other Russian official propagandists, including Soloviov. 10 years ago, Euromaidan began, and almost immediately nationalists appeared there. Slogans against the Russian-speaking population appeared there as well, Soloviov writes. And again, he is lying, because the Maidan emerged as a reaction to the decision of the then current, but now fugitive President Yanukovych to stop European integration, despite the support of this vector of development of the Ukrainian state by the majority of Ukrainian citizens, and his subsequent use of brutal force against peaceful protesters. All other events stemmed from this decision made by Yanukovych under the influence of Russia. But in fact, this card of alleged nationalists, of alleged language divide, even now, 10 years later, is being actively played by Russian propagandists. And unfortunately, there is some assistance from some former Ukrainian politicians who have been given a wide platform, including such on the TV channels of former presidents of Ukraine. And unfortunately, this card is now being played within Ukrainian society as well. Therefore, this is a call to everyone not to play alone with Russian propaganda, which is trying to split Ukrainians through this language argument, showing that there are allegedly first and second-class citizens of the state, and so on and so forth. Just look at what Russian propagandists write. In particular, on the channel of the same Solovyov, there is, as they call him, Roman August, a publicist, a combatant of the so-called special military operation. We see now that people will be killed for the Russian language in Ukraine. We must understand that a spiritual and religious war has been waged against Russia, and naturally the Russian language is the main point and vector of attack for our enemies. This is a complete lie. Both Ukrainian and Russian speakers, as well as speakers of other languages, serve in the armed forces of Ukraine, and all of them protect the Ukrainian land from the Russian aggressor. What all of us see now is a direct information and psychological special operation aimed at destroying Ukrainian unity. And the evidence of this is, in particular, the post of the Russian military propagandist Kots from Komsomolskaya Pravda, who actively quotes the thesis that Russian-speaking Ukrainian military are people of a different sort, and they, in particular, do not defend Ukraine. He also refers to the statement that Irina Farion, who has gone through the Russian language, and concluded that a citizen who does not speak the Ukrainian language cannot be Ukrainian. This is a statement that is now being investigated by the law enforcement agencies. I mean Irina Farion's statement. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian state is grateful to all the defenders of Ukraine, regardless of the language they use. Likewise, the Russian propagandist courts devoted not only just one, but several posts to this language issue over the course of just a few days. There are no Russian-speaking Ukrainians. There are no Russians who are called Ukrainians for some reason. No matter how much Ukrainian politicians support them, they still do not consider this government to be theirs. Neither those who fight on the battlefield, nor those who fight in the information space. You are strangers to this regime, Kots says, broadcasting the alleged position of the Ukrainian authorities, which is also a lie. Again, this is just acting out the split that Russian propaganda has now adopted to destroy Ukrainian unity. At the same time, some Ukrainian politicians and formerly non-public figures are playing along, which is once again a call for all of us not to support the Russian hype and to support all defenders of Ukraine, regardless of the language they use. Meanwhile, the so-called Russian leaders in the occupied territories, Gauleiters and war criminals no longer hide their intention to continue the offensive on Ukrainian lands up to the capital of Ukraine. In particular, Pushilin is making a statement that the entire territory of Ukraine will be liberated. There is no doubt, and whether many people want it or not, those who claim that we have to stop at some point, I will tell you the other point of view. Until we completely liberate the whole of Ukraine, it will not stop. Pushilin said this at the conference in Donetsk, in a Ukrainian city that was also occupied 10 years ago by the Russian army as an aggressor. Another interesting story that you can observe in recent days in the mouths of Russian propaganda is the spread of the idea that the fall, removal of power or death of the Ukrainian political leadership is inevitable, and therefore we should simply surrender to the aggressor. Soloviov says, Zelensky was put on such a pedestal and now they are actively trying to throw him off it. This is supposedly how the change of power in Ukraine will take place, according to a statement on Soloviov's channel, by, as they say, Henry Sardarian, a doctor of political science. A similar thesis has been promoted by a Russian propagandist with an American surname, Douglas McGregor, who we have repeatedly exposed in these briefings as a liar, who they credit as a retired US Army colonel, who is actually a Russia Today propagandist. I think there is a damn good chance that Zelensky may not survive in his office. This usually doesn't end well for a leader. In this way, the Russian state confirms the thesis voiced by the Ukrainian president himself, that his physical destruction remains one of the goals of the aggressor state in order to put into practice its vision of subjugating Ukraine to Russia after changing the authorities in Kiev. And of course, it is impossible to quote without a smile the propaganda thesis and nonsense that the Russian state propaganda machine spreads among its own citizens, explaining why hundreds of thousands of Russians would go to die on Ukrainian territory in a war that will end in the same national disgrace for them as it did in previous wars against sovereign states. Solovyov quotes, as he calls him, a military expert, Vasily Dandikin. The task is to weaken us, at least to collapse us in geopolitics, to drive us into the state of the 17th and 16th centuries. This is obvious, so Ukraine's population is not taken into account. In other words, according to this reasoning, it is not the Russians who came to kill Ukrainians, but someone is waging a war against Russia itself. This thesis has been quoted from one propaganda mouthpiece to another and has been spreading for 2 years. This thesis is absolute nonsense. It was Russia that came to kill on Ukrainian territory, and Ukraine had no aggressive plans against this country. There is a traditional call at the end of the briefing not to believe the propagandists of the aggressor state, to maintain critical thinking and clearly identify when inside Ukraine itself we see the continuation of Russian propaganda by people who are either nationally unconscious or openly working for the aggressor state as collaborators. Watch the Ukrainian national telethon, as well as foreign broadcasting channels such as Freedom Channel in Russian and English language UATV channel. Trust only the Ukrainian military and political leadership. See you soon.
Довіряйте українському військовому та політичному керівництву. До зустрічі!